Okay, I'm going to be presenting today on solar PV systems. The reason for this presentation is that I'd like to provide people with a basic understanding of how these systems operate, explain some of the benefits of the systems, and dispel some common myths you may have heard about solar. So again, I'll talk about how it works, system cost, lifespan, and then go into the benefits and dispel some of the myths you might have heard. So these systems are made up of your solar modules, an AC/DC inverter. There are more components in them, but I'm not going to get into too much detail here. So basically, the solar modules convert the sun's energy into electricity. That electricity is converted at the inverter from direct current to alternating current so that it can be used in our homes. It is routed to your utility meter where it goes through your panel to your home. Anything that you use at the time of production will offset your regular electricity usage. And then anything you're producing in excess of what you're using in your home will be sold back to the grid for the dollar per kilowatt hour value on your electricity bill. Anything that you use on site that you're not producing at the time, you will buy back from the utility company at your normal rate. Systems range in cost depending on the size of the system. Larger systems have a lower dollar per watt value than smaller systems, but the cost is roughly about $2.50 to $3.50 per watt for residential systems or systems of the size that you'd be putting on a community league typically. So a 5 kilowatt system would cost roughly $15,000 installed. The modules will last for about 25 years, but they can last a lot longer than that. What happens is typically that the modules themselves don't fail. They just start to produce a little bit less energy over time. So you can keep them up for 35 years, but they will be producing less than they produced when you first installed them. And then the inverter usually needs to be replaced at about the 15-year mark. An average home uses about 7,200 kilowatt hours per year. That would likely be significantly greater than what a community league would use. So a 5 kilowatt system would produce about 5,000 kilowatt hours per year, which would cover about 70% of the average home's electricity use. Likely that would get a community league close to net zero electricity. So some of the benefits I'm going to run through. Economic benefits include selling excess electricity back to the grid. This will help offset your electricity costs. You'll be less reliant on fluctuating electricity rates because anything you produce will be locked in at the amount that you paid for your system. You can also take advantage of a lot of grants and incentives for solar. For instance, right now, the city of Edmonton has a 40 cent per watt installed incentive for residential systems. The Alberta Municipal Solar Program currently still has solar incentives, a granting program where you can get about 95 cents per watt. It ranges depending on system size though. Environmental benefits include it being a renewable resource, meaning that the resource will never run out. We have an unlimited amount of sun. It's also generally considered to be carbon neutral in the sense that it doesn't add carbon to the atmosphere. The exception, of course, is when you produce and recycle the modules. Social benefits include adding profile to your community league. It also encourages green energy use throughout the community. Community members will see it, talk to you about it. There's a learning opportunity for them to learn more about solar. They'll be asking questions. And then they can also learn about how to get the systems installed because you'll have done it and can explain it to them. All right. Dispelling myths. This is important because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about solar. So if we can dispel some of the myths around it, I think it will be more widely accepted. So the first myth I'm going to talk about is that solar doesn't work well in winter climates. This is not true. If you look here, Alberta, which is much more wintry than a country like Germany, gets significantly more sun over the course of a year than Germany does, and yet we have a small fraction of the installed capacity of solar that Germany has. Solar does not depend on how hot or cold the climate is. It depends on how much sun it gets. In Alberta, while we live in a wintry climate, annually we receive a whole lot of sun. And then even though we don't get that much sun in winter, we get so much in summer that in a grid tied system, like I showed you before, that energy you get during summer will be able to offset the energy that you use during winter. Also, in terms of snow, while it's true that we get a lot of snow, there was a study done by Nate here in town, in Edmonton, where they had two different arrays set up at varying tilt angles, and they left one array clear of snow. They cleared the snow off one of the arrays every time it would snow, and the other array they left and just let the snow do what it was going to do. And they found that at the very most, the difference in production from the array where they didn't clear the snow off compared to what they did clear, the one where they cleared it, was only 4.7%. And that's at an 18-degree tilt angle. So if your array is set up at 53 degrees or 45 degrees, the amount of the effect of snow is basically completely negligible. And the reason for that is because the majority of production occurs in summer when the days are longer, so snow won't affect any of that production. And it's also because when snow builds up on the modules, it's usually cloudy, so they're not producing much. And then when the sun comes out and they start producing, the snow tends to melt off because of the heat from the sun, and then they're producing at their full amount anyway. So going back here, the next myth I'll address is that solar doesn't work because batteries are too expensive. There are no batteries in a grid-tied solar system typically. As I showed you here, there aren't any batteries. Excess power is sold back to the grid, and any power that you need that you're not producing is purchased from the grid. So the price of batteries does not affect the system at all, or the cost of the system at all, because there are no batteries. The next one is solar isn't economically viable. As I showed you, Germany produces, or has, as of 2017, had 42,000 megawatts of solar installed. Worldwide in 2017, there were 398,000 megawatts installed, which was enough to produce 2% of the world's electricity use. So all this is to say that if solar wasn't economically viable, there wouldn't be billions of dollars of solar infrastructure worldwide. Finally, or second to the last, solar systems require a lot of work. Maintenance on these systems is extremely minimal because there's no moving parts. Typically, you don't need anyone to come and maintain them at all unless something goes wrong, which isn't common. And most companies offer a warranty on their systems, or the good ones do anyway, so they'll often come and fix them for free if something does go wrong. The biggest work people think is involved is in cleaning snow off the modules in winter, but as I showed you before, there's no need to do that. The effects of snow on your production are so minimal that it's not worth the effort of cleaning them. So you never really need to clean them. In terms of dirt and stuff that can build up on them, that gets washed away from rain. Typically, they account for that in their, like a solar company, when it gives you its estimate on how much production you're going to get, will account for the loss of production due to soiling. So it's usually about 2% per year due to dirt that builds up on the modules. So pretty insignificant. And finally, the environmental cost of manufacturing solar panels outweighs the benefits. I've heard this one a lot. It is patently false. The CO2, the emissions equivalence of solar compared to fossil fuels is about 3 to 10 times less than fossil fuel production. That includes manufacturing of the modules and recycling of the modules. It doesn't include the environmental cost of building a fossil fuel power plant. So actually the numbers are probably even better than that, because people think, oh, well, producing the solar panels takes a bunch of energy and materials, and same with recycling them, and they include that in these calculations, and it still comes out ahead, and yet no one includes the amount of emissions that it takes to build a fossil fuel power plant. So in my mind, it's a silly argument, and it's just not true. So that's all I got for you. Some useful resources if you want to learn more about this stuff, you can see here. There's a website here for solar education for adults. There's also one that's good for kids if you want to teach your kids about solar. There's a couple websites here for granting and incentive programs for solar. The bottom one is the residential rebate program. You can also go to Greenly's webpage. We have a list of grants and incentives available for community leagues. We also have educational resources available as well. So that's it. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.